From 2010 to 2015, I was the Director of National Social Policies in Uruguay. It was an intense period of mobilization, social mobilization, for the new rights agenda. That included marriage equality, included abortion, included legalization and regulation of cannabis, and also affirmative actions for Afro-American people, for Afro-Uruguayan people. In 2009, a gender identity law was approved in Uruguay, and in 2013, the equal marriage law. These two laws promoted a new agenda for social protection, and the question was how to include LGBT people not only in a juridic way, but in social policies. When I arrived to the Ministry of Social Development and said that I wanted to approach social protection from a human rights approach, they asked me, are you going to write a new Declaration of Rights? What are you going to do? They didn't know what this human rights approach meant. What did we find in Uruguay when we analyzed the social protection system and its relation with LGBT people? LGBT people were invisible to social protection policies. An example is that there was no category for trans people, transgender and transsexual people, so they were meant to be men in women clothes. So they were really invisible for social protection policies. Civil servants were not prepared to interact with trans people, trans persons. They didn't know if they have to say their name, or if that name was not how to say, in line with their gender identity, and the instruments built to measure social exclusion could not capture trans people exclusion, social exclusion and reality. So they kept aside from social protection. What did we do? First of all, we called organizations to build a common agenda of social policy and sexual diversity. We trained civil servants on sexual diversity, human rights, and non-discrimination. We backed transgender and transsexual people in changing their name and sex on their documents. We gave access to all trans people to a basic cash transfer program. We included affirmative actions for transgender and transsexual people in job and training programs, a 2% affirmative action for them. And I don't know if in English you say like this, but we made an open call for civil service when you recruit civil servants exclusively for transgender people, because we knew that if that call was like a general call, they would not succeed. So 7 transgender and transsexual persons were employed at the Social Development Ministry, and nowadays when you arrive to the Social Development Ministry, the one that welcomes you is a transgender woman, and that changes a lot the perception of what's going on there. So tomorrow you will see some images. I won't show you now. Some useful lessons to conclude. First of all, human rights approach as a systematic approach to public policy building is still unknown for many people, for those who who rule. They think that human rights is like something the UN does, but it has nothing to do with their everyday work. Although it is in its initial stages, human rights approach related to LGBT rights is, I think, is an effective framework to work with. The Yogyakarta principles, the report of the Office of the High Commissioner for the Human Rights are a good material to work with. The UPR mechanism at the Human Rights Council is a good forum where to discuss about these issues. In fact, last year we came representing Uruguay to the UPR, and one of the recommendations from well, I won't say which country, but one of the recommendations was that Uruguay should go backwards to the idea that family is composed by a man and a woman, heterosexual, and Uruguay obviously rejected that recommendation. But there were other recommendations that were really interesting going forward for LGBT rights. I think that linking human rights approach, LGBT rights, and social protection is about rethinking existing social policies, not building separate ones. To include the main thing to do here is to include in what already exists, not just social programs, but also instruments that give access to them, poverty measures, for example. If you strictly measure poverty through the idea of the income of people, of each person, maybe that not reflects the social exclusion that LGBT people live. Then also affirmative actions are a way to build not just formal equality, but substantive equality, though they are heavily contested. So you have to be really prepared to put this in the public debate and back what you are proposing. Communication is central to a public policy that pursues a cultural change. So we really worked a lot on communicating what we were doing. And the main challenge, I think, is how to introduce diversity in universal social policies and not just in compensatory ones. Because it was not easy at all, but we could introduce this approach, the idea that people were diverse and family also, but the main social policies, education, health, social security, are still in depth.